Hey, we're live on a special edition evening where we're going to be talking about the ultimate vlogging cameras based on all these new cameras that are going to be dropping, which I think is wildly exciting from, the Sony A7S III, Sony A7000. We're not really sure what it's going to be called, but the mini A9. We've got the Canon EOS R dropping. Panasonic's going to be announcing their full frame camera. And Nikon has released their Z6 and Z7, I guess Z6 and Z7 for all of my American viewers. And it's kind of fascinating as we're navigating this whole world to, see what's happening. Anyway, say hi, you guys, for the people on the live stream. And just let me know that my audio and video and stuff is good. And we're going to jump into it in a minute here. If you're not watching live, I'm going to post the time down in the comments below where we kind of get into it a little bit more. But, I'm going to be sharing some thoughts and things here in, a few seconds to be able to just kind of keep things rolling and set the context for this. But just want to let a few people head on here. Jonathan Delapina, how are you? You know what? I'm feeling good. If you're a longtime follower of this channel, things have been a little bit quiet lately as we've been investing a lot into Justin and Greg. And this tech channel will get the attention it deserves sometime in the near future. I think especially when I have some new things to talk about. But, for a while there's just you can make stuff happen. But especially in the world that I live in, kind of this vlogging and fast content creation, it honestly felt a little bit quiet. And I was getting so disheartened because no camera makers would make a camera that I could legitimately get excited about until now. So we're going to talk about that. Charlie Flat, yo, QLLG. I'm not sure what that means, but DSLR video shooter. Hey, thanks for hanging out here. Man, so much exciting stuff. Hey, how excited are you, Caleb? This is going to be good stuff. Beta Band says, hey, guys, it has not been this exciting in the camera world for a very long time. My fear is that we are going to continue to fall into the same trap that we always fall into of every single camera manufacturer missing out on one important thing that gives me selfishly, but also many of you guys who are watching, gives you something lacking. You don't get the ultimate camera. And just for context, this is what makes an ultimate vlogging camera, in my opinion. And it's really not that hard. This is close. Okay. Flip out screen is just, it's a must. And I wish that it wasn't. But after vlogging with it for a while, then trying to do it without it, then trying to do a monitor on top to solve it, and then going back to a flip out screen, it just makes everything so much faster and easier. And time is really important when you're vlogging or, trying to turn around videos really quick. So that's important. Great autofocus, also very, very important. I vlogged with Panasonic for a while, and once I got into good autofocus, it was just and then I tried going back and no, couldn't do it. Good autofocus. An audio input jack, obviously, as soon as you go outside and there's any bit of wind, you want to be able to have good quality audio, and directional audio can be really, really handy. So that is important. I think in-body image stabilization is actually very, very helpful, especially when you're switching over to B-roll and there's lots of nice lenses that don't have stabilization. So it's nice to be able to do, as well as jittery, shaky vlogs are not the best. Now, if you can get lenses that have stabilization built into them, like a lot of, cheaper vlogging ultra-wide lenses have now, that's fine. And that's good. But for the B-roll, anyway, I like that. So that would be on my list for an ultimate one. 4K, I don't think is necessary for vlogging, but I do love 120 frames per second. 60 it's fine, but 120 is special, and especially because it smooths out video a lot more. Like when you're hand-holding and you're shooting at 120 frames per second, you can slow it down that much. It just covers a multitude of sins and looks really, really cool. So I think some kind of good slow motion option, if we're talking ultimate, is 120 frames per second. What else needs to be in there? Obviously, accessibility to good amounts of lenses is important, but we've always been stuck in this thing where Canon wouldn't give us 4K or super slow motion, and they also don't give us any kind of in-body image stabilization. They have digital IS, which is, it's okay, but then you're cropping in more, and it's kind of annoying. So that's been Canon's thing that they won't do. Sony, they would not give us a flip out screen. I mean, only the A5100, which then you don't get a, audio input jack or any of the fancy features, just, none of that. And then we have Panasonic, who wouldn't give us a good focusing system, and Nikon was kind of a mess for a long time. So, which has been, very, very interesting by way of recap. And so if you know me, what have I been vlogging with? Well, I've actually been enjoying this Canon M50 and have created a lot of content with it recently. Now, is it the best camera in the world? No. But what's amazing is how it just works, and it's not that expensive. And before this, I had a Sony a6500. And before that, I had a couple of different Panasonics. And before that, I had a whole bunch of big Nikon full frame gear. So I've gone from I've had really expensive stuff, and I could find a way budget-wise to get any camera on the market if I really wanted to. And I'm sorry if that's not your case, but I mean, that's what I do for a living. And so it's fine. But the funny thing is, and maybe it's encouraging for you guys, with access to any camera on the market, the camera that I've been vlogging with and enjoying is the Canon M50. And this is serious content. But, for me, the things that have really been lacking in here are low light is a big one. And I wish it didn't matter so much, but in vlogging, you get in situations, especially when you have a slow ultra wide angle lens on, where you need good low light. And this camera's so noisy once your ISO gets up there. So you get into low light and it kind of falls apart. And there's just no good options to put a faster ultra wide angle lens on this. I also, it's maybe a little bit picky, but 11 millimeters on a 1.6 crop factor on a Canon is just not that wide. But overall, you know what? It's worked fine. There's no 120 frames per second, which I would like. And I would love for some kind of in-body image stabilization, which it doesn't have. But overall, it's got a good autofocus. It's got a mic input jack. It's got the flip out screen. It's got an ultra wide angle lens. It's relatively inexpensive. I put the cage on it, although too late because I dropped it once on the microphone input jack, and it's so far wedged in there I can never remove it. That's okay. And with my Sigma 18-35, it shoots beautiful cinematic B-roll and good photos as well, if you don't count for back focusing. But overall, it's a good package. But for me, I'm wanting to step up the quality of our vlogs even more as we're kind of pushing into more things, and still not want to have to compromise and worry or waste my time having to think about it. So that's where we get into some of these new options. Before, so Caleb had to bounce. Cool. Thanks, man. VGK coverage. What's a great mic for a DSLR using a Rode lapel, but getting that hiss and always have to use noise reduction on all my audio of videos? Okay. Well, you could get into a powered microphone. I happen to know that you have a little bit of an older Canon, and the preamps, that's what boosts the microphone signal on it, is not as good. So if you get a microphone that has a battery built into it, like a Rode video mic, even, that will help. But obviously, you want to be sitting a little bit close to the camera, or I have a hack on another video here, how you can put it up on a stand somewhere above you. But get a microphone with a battery, and that should give you better quality audio, because then the battery's doing the heavy lifting and not your camera. So try that out. But those older Canons are they're not great, but unfortunate. Charlie 5, you tried vlogging the casino before? I mean, we've been in Vegas. I don't know if we've vlogged. Yeah, I've done a little bit of vlogging in the casinos there. Not here at home, though. I don't think so. Betaban says, I've been tossing around what to get. M50 is on that list. Fish at night, so that makes me hesitant. Yeah, I mean, I guess any camera, is that fair? Sonys are definitely better in low light. I've found that, not just because they have a slightly bigger sensor, but they just seem to handle the low light better, like a A6300 or A6500. Obviously, going up to a full frame camera captures a lot more light, but then we're just talking in a different class of spending. What's nice about the Sonys too is Sigma makes a 16 millimeter f1.4, which works out to 24 millimeter, but it's still relatively wide, good enough for one person vlogging. And that would actually do quite well at night because it's letting in so much light. There's not really, there's just not as many good wide angle, super fast lenses for cameras, or for Canon that's reasonably priced. So Sony, but then you don't have a flip out screen, which is annoying, but some of that may change here. We're going to talk about that in a minute, or maybe now. So We've got all of these camera announcements. Nikon kind of came first out of the gate here with their Z6 and Z7. I'm going to say Z. I'm sorry, guys. I just apologize right now. It's Canada. That's how we say it. Z6, Z7. Which, when the leaks were coming, I was like, this is exciting. And I have a soft spot in my heart for Nikon. It was kind of my first like full frame proper camera system. And I love the way they took photos, but the video features were just really lacking. And they continue to lack, in the sense of they've done some really great things. Okay. Full frame mirrorless cameras, the size of the bodies, look good. These are shooting 4K, which is awesome. They've got good 1080p options. I'm trying to remember if they do 120 frames per second. They might. And they were supposed to have upgraded the focusing system to be more Canon-esque, I believe, to use a contrast and a phase detection. So the autofocus was supposed to be good. Initial things I'm hearing is the autofocus is not good, but hopefully they can fix that through some firmware updates and be able to massage that out. But we saw the same thing with Olympus, where Olympus had a contrast phase detection system and just didn't work that well. So I think it's going to take them a little while to be able to sort that out. I think the biggest thing with Nikon is that their lens options that come natively with the camera right now is just like super weak. Like just super weak. So you got to let like the system develop a little bit more, let them work out some kinks and some of those bugs, and then maybe they'll be on to something. But I would say they have some work to do because they've just been behind for so long. So they also didn't give me a flip out selfie screen. So when we talk about high-end vlogging, they don't meet my criteria for that. So, but exciting stuff if you're behind the camera and you're a Nikon shooter. They basically delivered to you a Sony A7 III that probably doesn't focus as well. And the video features, I imagine, will not quite be there, but close. So, all right. They're basically just playing defense to try and get people to stop the bleeding from switching from Sony to Nikon. So, that it's progress, though. And it's good. It's good because they will push Canon more, because those two are, anyway, it's good for everybody. Then the next thing that we heard about was this Canon full frame mirrorless camera, which everybody thought was going to be like way down the road, like a long ways off, maybe later in the fall, maybe in the new year. And the rumors were swirling back and forth. And then boom, it just kind of like all the rumors fell into place. And we basically know everything about this camera. It's a Canon full frame mirrorless camera. It's like a 30 megapixel sensor, does 4K, although we haven't heard about whether it's going to crop in a ton or not. It's got a flip out selfie style screen. It's got dual pixel autofocus, which is awesome. It's got a microphone input jack and a headphone jack to be able to listen. That's cool. So appreciate that. The letdown for me was it's still 1080p at 60 frames per second or 720p at 120 frames per second. Like, what? And no 5-axis or any kind of like image stabilization. I'm sure it'll have the digital IS that they've been doing, but the lens options that come with it are actually pretty cool. You've got this 28 to 70 millimeter f2, which is in some ways like a video shooting dream. F2 from 28 to 70 on a full frame camera with dual pixel autofocus. Delicious. Love that. A 24 to 105 f4, which is kind of a video shooter's Swiss Army knife that's good for everything. But because it's mirrorless, it's actually like fairly compact and it's lighter, which is cool. And then they've got like fast primes. The thing that I'm missing is an ultra wide angle for vlogging. So if you wanted to do it, you'd be getting something like the 16 to 35 f4 with an adapter that you would have to put on. And then now you're actually kind of losing, like the nice thing about a mirrorless is they're compact and the lenses are compact and they feel compact. And now you're going to be putting this massive lens, extending it with an adapter. Might be a little bit messy, but in some ways, what's weird to me about this camera is it's this full frame mirrorless camera. It's essentially an M50. Like it's spec wise, it's almost identical to an M50 in the context of what I'm doing. I'm sure the focusing and the photos and the different things will be, tremendous, better, but it's an M50. 4K, which the M50 shoots. We don't know the crop factor, so maybe it'll be a little bit wider. Cool. I just back up the M50, no problem, or put a wider lens on. It's got a microphone input jack. Yes, it has a headphone jack. Fine. You're not going to use that for vlogging. It's got a flip out screen, which again, Canon is the only company in the world up to this point to actually give us like a full frame like camera with a flip out screen, which, props to them. But flip out screen, microphone input jack, 1080p at 60 frames per second or 120 frames per second at 720p. I mean, it's slightly a few more megapixels. I mean, the thing that remains to be seen, and this is what I got to know, is will it be way better at low light? And absolutely yes. It's kind of like, it's weird. It's like an M50 and it's also like a 6D Mark II. Like for vlogging, when it comes to vlogging, the EOS R provides you actually really no benefit other than size over a 6D Mark II. I mean, 4K, but like for vlogging, I don't really need 4K. If you want to vlog in 4K, fine, but you can't do 4K slow-mo. You can't do 4K 60. So you could do 4K at 24 or 4K at 30, but then you've got 1080p at 60 frames per second like the 6D Mark II can do. 6D Mark II does great low light because it's a full frame camera, you know, so video-wise, I thought the 6D Mark II looked great. 6D Mark II's got a flip-out screen. 6D Mark II's got a microphone input jack. It's just a little bit more compact, but then you got to use an adapter to be able to use the lens. So yeah, for the world that I would be living in, if it was similarly priced or maybe a few $100s more in the context of vlogging, EOS R, cool. Well, I mean, why not? You know, it's got the latest and greatest, but otherwise it's like, nah, I wouldn't be getting it necessarily for that. I mean, maybe I've been thinking about 6D Mark II because the low light's great on it, flip out screen, microphone input jack, good autofocus. It's kind of your only option for good autofocusing, great low light selfie screen vlogging camera. So, you know, maybe, but it doesn't actually get me excited. I'm like, oh my goodness, the EOS M or EOS R checks all the boxes. So that's a side random note about that. So am I excited about it? I think the lens option is cool. The gap for me is you've got this 28 to 70 millimeter f2, which for photographers having image stabilization, like whatever, that camera, you'll be able to push the ISO so high for photos that you can get your shutter speed up and it won't really matter. But for video, having that IS is so nice. And the camera, I guess you could turn on digital IS, which, you know, it'll be fine. You know, it'll be fine. But to not have that in-body image stabilization, that would have really been nice to get that full frame coverage, because 28 millimeters isn't that wide already. And then you're turning on digital IS and now you're at like 32 maybe to closer to 35 millimeter. That's not like really a wide angle perspective. So, you know, that's the only disappointment. So the thing that still gives me the bastion of hope is Sony. Sony has two cameras slated for release, and this is very interesting. The one is, well, we don't know what it's going to be called. It's basically a crop sensor Sony A9. This is going to be crazy focusing, crazy high photo shutter speed, similar to the A9, which again, I don't personally like, I don't care about. Although if you're a sports shooter, being able to shoot at like 20 frames per second on a crop sensor where those full frame lenses get a whole bunch more reach, cool. That will be awesome. But the rumors I'm hearing about it that I think will make this camera amazing and basically fix almost every Sony issue is it is supposed to be the first like proper swiveling screen on a Sony. Yes. It is going to have unreal, amazing autofocus. Yes. It will have a microphone input jack. Yes. It will have the new Z battery, which, I mean, I hope this is true. Some rumors, yes. Some rumors, no. But the Z battery extends the battery life, and Sony's have horrible battery life. So that is awesome. 4K at 60 frames per second. So you could actually vlog in 4K, shoot your slow-mo in 4K, which is awesome. But we're either going to get, I mean, 120 frames per second they've had, but rumor is 180 frame per second slow motion, like a GH5, except it's a bigger sensor, a crop sensor. And I think overall that would be amazing. And for me, if that was released tomorrow, I would buy it tomorrow. I would say, see you later, because the low light on that is going to be much better, because even my A6500, the low light was much better than this. And it's going to have the 5-axis, you know, the steady shot, Sony's image stabilization. So it would be smoother. Sony makes the 10 to 18 millimeter f4 crop sensor, and that's a great vlogging lens. Better, this is f4 to 5.6 and not as wide, so it gets dark, and you know, that's cool. Plus Sigma has some cool lenses, and there's already lots of cool like E-mount lenses where the system for this, there's not as many cool lenses. So, you know, I would be all over that until now we get this other rumor that the Sony A7S III is dropping. Now, here's the wild part about the story. We've had the Sony A7S II for a long time, and it has really been, I would say, the king of video shooters besides the GH5. Like if you want full frame video, you're getting an A7S II. And we have had a video do just over 10 million views and a video do 3 million views, both shot on an A7S II. The funny thing is they weren't like crazy cinematic. There was fun videos, but you know, interesting fact. But a lot of people have Sony A7S IIs, and then I mean GH5s for, you know, different reasons. But you know, the king of full frame shooters, wild low light, especially considering how old they are, because it's got like this 12 megapixel full frame sensor that's just like great for video. But there were a lot of limitations that, you know, have since been raised about, you know, crop factors and speeds and the footage kind of falling apart and S-Log. And, you know, there were some things about it, but the A7S III, the rumors on it are insane. What's crazy is apparently Sony has had this camera ready for months. They've had the A7S III. It's ready to go. It's wild. It's phenomenal. But the A7 III sales were so strong, and there was no competitors even to that thing, that they weren't going to release it. They were just going to hold on to it until they felt like they needed it. Well, now with what we're going to talk about, Panasonic going to be announcing their full frame camera, Canon coming out with a full frame mirrorless, Nikon coming out with their full frame mirrorless. They've apparently put the pressure on that Sony is going to announce in the next like 30-ish days or something. I mean, there's probably people who have it under NDA and they're laughing at me because I don't know, but you know, enough of the rumors to come out. Here's the crazy thing about the specs on this camera. So full frame, 4K, 60 frame per second, HDR right on the camera. So you can, that's crazy. So it's got this like stacked sensor that can do 4K, 60 frame per second HDR, you know, basically shoot HDR all day long, 180 frames per second, basically like that A7000 or whatever it is. You know, you're gonna have crazy slow motion. It's going to be insane in low light. The picture on it is supposed to be absolutely wild. There's a brand new color science that deals with some of the issues that Sony's been having with color science. Obviously, it'll have the new Z battery, which will be so much better. Basically, the ultimate video camera that is just supposed to like blow everyone out of the water. The question for me that I'm not sure about is, will they give us a flip out articulating screen? Because if they did, I would finally be like massively excited for something, because I would take that. I would put the 16-35 F4. I'd be tempted to do the 2.8, but it wouldn't be stable enough. Probably the F4. It would crush in low light. It would be cinematic because of the full frame. It would look good in every single scenario. I could shoot 4K all day long if I wanted to. Vlogging in HDR would actually be cool, and there'd be certain scenarios where I would not care one bit, but then there would be other situations where I'd go, yeah, I want this vlog to look amazing, and being able to shoot HDR right in the camera. Okay, amazing, super cool. It would check all the boxes of the crazy super slow motion. It'll have steady shot, and it would just be, it would just be amazing. But I have a feeling they won't give us a flip out screen, and I'll be relegated to doing that Sony A7000 crop sensor thing, whatever it is. That remains to be seen. We'll know in the next few weeks-ish. I think there'll be some more rumors coming out and some more, you know, specs will leak. They're keeping that camera very close to their chest, which is kind of fascinating. And then the last thing, and again, this is what seemed to push them, is Panasonic has announced that they are doing a full frame mirrorless camera. And I mean, if you're not familiar with this, you know, Panasonics have a micro four thirds sensor, which basically is, you know, half the size of a full frame sensor. And so that means less background blur. That means that they can't be as good at low light, although the GH5S is quite good at low light, although that's a slightly bigger sensor, but really neither here nor there. Them doing a full frame camera is going to absolutely push the envelope, because it puts pressure on Canon's, you know, C series, the C100, 200, 300. It puts pressure on, you know, other pro cameras, and even, you know, Sony's full frame FS7 and some of those things, because there's just going to be so many video features packed in there. The thing that's interesting is normally Sony is the one who makes the sensors for all of these guys. And so lots of times they just kind of like share a sensor. Like Nikon will just buy the Sony sensor, the same one that's in another one, make a couple of tweaks to it, and they're good to go. The rumors are that Panasonic is not using an existing Sony sensor. It is something brand new, and it may not even be manufactured by Sony. It might be, it might not be. Here's my concern about this. What I want is good autofocus for Panasonic to go, fine, you guys, we will give you proper autofocus. Now, they've been saying, it's quality. They won't put all those extra little pixels on the sensors to be able to do the focusing, yada, yada, yada. For me, I'm like, I don't care, because Sony, the image quality is great and they have it on there. And even Canon, I don't mind it. They have it on there. I'm not like the super wild video like enthusiast that's shooting film. So, you know, it remains to be seen, I guess, if they will give us proper good autofocus, like actually great autofocus, then yes, absolutely, I'm excited. But it's going to mean a whole new lens system. All the lenses that you have for Panasonic, they won't work anymore, you know. So that's the nice thing about Sony, is Sony's been around for years and they have a lot of lenses already developed. And yes, they need more, but they will continue to come. But, you know, it's not adapters and all that stuff. So Panasonic obviously can adapt to other systems, but it remains to be seen. But I'm at least happy that Panasonic announced that, because that's going to be the last thing to push Sony to put the A7S III out. So that's cool. I've been talking for a while. Let's grab some comments here. Beta Ben says, what about autofocus M50 versus that Sony? Honestly, they both autofocus really well. Here's the difference I find between Canon autofocus and Sony autofocus. Canon autofocus is really smooth. Like the dual pixel does a really smooth job of kind of switching focus between one subject to another focus. It feels very smooth. But I would say it's not actually always as fast as Sony. Sony, to a fault at times, can just be like, and it nails the focus. It doesn't feel as smooth. But I'll tell you where it's really, really handy is when I'm shooting 120 frames per second. I put on my Sigma 18 to 35, and I put autofocus on a single point, and I put it to responsive, fast, which basically the fastest autofocus settings. And you can just move from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And at 120 frames per second, it is just like grabbing focus like very quickly. Whereas I feel like Canon, if I tried to do that, it would be smoother. But at 120 frames per second, you actually want those transitions quicker, or else in your 120 frames per second slow motion, it looks like, and it's like, cool, that just took way too long because you want it to be snappy. So in that sense, that's what I find. Sony isn't as refined, but it's very fast. And so there are benefits to both, but Canon's, they say, is superior. I was happy with both. The focusing on both, great. I'm happy to work with both of those systems. So who knows? Flip out a must, absolutely. The Freedom Hustler, will there be a Canon 90D soon? All the rumor mills that I have my ear to the ground say not soon. It's apparently, I think the next camera that is slated is some kind of replacement, but it sounds like it may be spring or even summer next year. I think the thing we'll see sooner than that is the replacement for the M5, the Canon mirrorless, the M5, which is kind of the flagship top of the line. I don't know, but I think the M5 might be the first Canon we see that, other than the 1DX Mark II, that does 120 frames per second. And maybe we'll do 4K without the giant crop factor, and, you know, maybe a couple other things that puts in the same league as Sony. I don't know, but I think we'll see that before we see a 90D. And I mean, the 80D has been selling like a champ, and it's funny to see that a guy like Casey Neistat is back to using his 80D. Why? Because it works. And at the end of the day, we sometimes get lost in the specs and all the hype and all these kinds of things. But for a guy who, I mean, obviously biased, Casey's my favorite YouTuber because I love his storytelling. His camera doesn't really get in the way of his storytelling. He's tried other cameras; those ones have gotten in the way. The 80D just kind of works. And for him, he's got his flip out screen. He's got video quality. It's fine. He doesn't color grade his videos. He doesn't really care about that. It's got the mic input jack. It just kind of works. You know, lens has stabilization built into it. Cool. So it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm a little bit more nerdy. I care about this stuff, but you know, obviously he's made that work. What's prediction on Sony pricing? Beta Ben says. That's a good question. I think this high-end crop sensor camera, I don't know, but I have a sense it'll probably drop at $19.99 US. Like they'll probably put it right around that $2,000 mark, which is a lot because it's similar to an A7 III, but it's going to do the 4K 60 and it's going to do some of those other things. Who knows? Maybe there'll be more. Maybe they will drop it at $24.99. I don't know, but I kind of, that's a lot for a crop sensor body, a lot. That's my prediction. A7S III will be whatever the A7 III is now, plus a bit more, like $3,000 plus. It's not going to be cheap, but it is going to do things that nothing else on the camera market can do. So they're going to be able to charge a premium for it, which will be very, very interesting. Mojo, Canon 99D Mark II. Yeah. Lieutenant Deadeye, they would have to retool for another body. Much cheaper to build all your full frame cameras on one stock body. I think that's maybe in regards to Panasonic full frame camera. I would have to retool for another body. I'm trying to think of what in regards to. For Panasonic, the interesting thing is the GH5 is basically the same size as all the other like full frame mirrorless. Like it's pretty big, so they probably would be able to fit in there, but I'm sure they'll make some adjustments for that. Sorry, I don't. Sometimes there's a bit of lag here, so I don't necessarily know the context of that. So, Daniel Karate, why the Jimmy Fallon cardboard cutout? Hey, Jimmy,